Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
You've heard the age-old motto of physicians, do no harm. Sounds pretty basic, almost too basic to even say, but of course medical mistakes are a major cause of death. I don't just mean a botched surgery, but diagnosing something wrong or missing a diagnosis. And of course, anyone who knows a bit about the history of medicine, knows about practices like leeches or bloodletting. Here's a painting of a doctor applying leeches in the 18th century. I'm going to guess that did more harm than good. So do no harm is actually a pretty good motto for doctors, I think. But what is harm to an individual patient? Each patient is different. A doctor and his patient can together come up with an understanding of what the real problem is and what the best solution is for a patient that might be completely different than for another patient. That's what happens when a doctor's loyalty and attention are towards a patient individually rather than an aggregated mass of people. And there you have the difference between a doctor who actually has to solve a particular patient's problems, taking into account everything about that patient, between that real practicing doctor and those doctors who call themselves doctors but are actually non-practicing doctors who may have never practiced, may have never had a patient, certainly not practiced in many years, who are really politicians or bureaucrats with an MD, or quite often not even an MD, but rather a degree in public health, whatever that is. And that brings us to the Theresa Tams of the world, because no doctor who put his or her patient first would ever talk like this.
I think the public has to know this is one of the worst case scenarios in terms of an infectious disease outbreak, in that their cooperation is sought. If there are people who are non-compliant, there are definitely laws and public health powers that can quarantine people in mandatory settings. It's potential you could track people, put bracelets on their arms, have police and other setups to ensure quarantine is undertaken.
I think many doctors are conservative. I don't just mean that politically, I mean that in terms of do no harm. That's why doctors are skeptical of quacks and quackery. That's why medical doctors don't like pretend doctors or rival health ideologies like naturopathy. There's some snobbery that comes with that, but it is true that medical doctors do have a knowledge base that is beyond merely the common sense of the common man, even when augmented by the internet. Many doctors are conservative, but I have never heard of a public health official, I don't even want to call them doctors, any more than Dr. Seuss with a doctor, or that Jill Biden is a doctor. Sure, she's a doctor of education from the University of Delaware. Folks, if it's an emergency on an airplane and someone says there's a heart attack, is there a doctor on the plane? And you can't say, yeah, I'm coming to help, you probably shouldn't go around calling yourself a doctor all the time. So public health doctors are simply bureaucrats who use their medical degrees or their PhDs as appeals to authority. They make economic decisions or political decisions, or these days police decisions, completely outside the scope of medicine, but they insist you call them doctor because they're trading on the expert reputation of practicing medical doctors, as if their advice on closing parks or banning kids or having police pull over cars or banning kids hockey tournaments while permitting NHL hockey tournaments, a baldly political decision, as if that is a medically sound decision, and to criticize this is to criticize medicine as opposed to what it is. It's just a political and lobbying decision. I'm getting a bit sick of these self-important doctators, to be honest. I like regular doctors. I think most people trust their own doctor. You can see a few brave ones who speak out. Calvin Kaur in Ontario, very brave. Our friend Dr. Roger Hodkinson in Alberta. But they get pounced on by their leftist authoritarian rivals. And that hasn't stopped the ones I've just mentioned yet. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.